Welcome back to Nitpicks with Nick, featuring our special guest, Acne on My Face. Can we get a round of applause? Can we get a round of applause for the Acne on My Face, please? Today, I'll be reviewing everybody's favorite viciously violent comic book adaptation, The Boys, Season 2 to be specific. Just some context for this story, I'm not too much of a TV guy, as it's just too much for my tiny baby brain to concentrate on. But I absolutely plowed through the first season. I thought it was very well written, had great characters, and definitely had some of the most tense moments on the medium-sized screen in my living room. I also liked that they deviated from the comic by not giving the boys powers. It made the confrontations between the heroes and the boys so much more intense and filled with drama. Keep that in mind, because it's going to come back later. I basically see a CGI battle every time I blink, so this was a really nice change of pace. Every episode left me wanting more, and the season ended on an absolute banger where, what, Billy's wife is still alive, and she has a kid, and it's Homelander's kid? That cliffhanger left me awake for days, thinking about the potential stories that could be set up for Season 2, and how amazing they would be. Please, everyone, quiet down, quiet down. The winner for a pretty solid follow-up to a first season, but by no means perfect, goes to The Boys, Season 2. Yeah, get on up here, guys, get on up here, you deserve it. Yeah, so I didn't think the second season was as good as the first, but it's by no means bad, and you should definitely still watch it, especially if you like the first season. And because the third season is going to be fire, I can just tell by the ending of this season. For reasons I'll explain soon, so sit in your seat. I just think it didn't really live up to the expectations of the first season. It's hard to capture lightning in a bottle twice, and the second season kind of shows that phrase is true. So, what went wrong? Now, I want to go over some of the pros and things I liked about this season before I go into the verbal abuse that's going to take place in roughly 5 to 10 minutes. Just like the first season, the characters were pretty well written. Most of them. They took some logical steps in their character arcs, which made for some amazing moments. I thought the web of characters was built in such a way where parallels were visible and satisfying to see. Sadly, the grass is not always green on the other side, as even some of the best written characters are still not super strong. First off, a lot of the side characters were explored way more thoroughly than in the first season. Mother's Milk's strange tendencies were explained in a pretty heartwarming way, even if it was just blatantly told to the audience. Overall, the extra screen time he had was put to good use. It felt like he took more of a parental role for this season. Yep, parental Mother's Milk. I mean, we like to have fun around here, so. Similar to Mother's Milk, Kimiko had more screen time that was much appreciated, and turned her into more of an actual character. Lots of genuine moments with Frenchie helped build their relationship, even if it's not the most groundbreaking thing in the world. Although I didn't think her whole killing on the side thing was completely necessary, especially because her descent is just played off moments later, I think it worked overall to develop her more as a character. And it worked for Frenchie and her's relationship, so I guess I can't really complain. Speaking of Frenchie, not to beat that horse, but he also got more screen time and was a lot more fleshed out in this season. I liked how he was shown as a more empathetic hero that had to choose between his emotions and rationality in a lot of situations. And I liked how this manifested in his control over Kimiko and his desperation to form a relationship with her. He also had some pretty great motivation for this that was explored in one of the later episodes, and overall I think his character just worked really well. Well done, The Boys, well done. Then there's also the more in-your-face main characters. That's some pretty great development in my humble opinion. Billy Butcher has an interesting arc of understanding the moral repercussions of his actions. Billy believes that everything is evil, that there is nothing good out there anymore, except for his love, but even that is tarnished. This results in heinous and violent actions taken against the Soups, which Huey tries to correct. I would now like to go over some specifics of this character arc. Billy learns the benefits of having Huey after berating him on the boat. Huey is desperately looking for any validation from Billy, but he refuses to give it to him, like a scared little puppy asking for a treat. By the end of the first couple of episodes, he learns that Huey, and therefore morals, are important to him and the team. Starlight starts working with the boys, and Butcher doesn't like cooties just as much as he doesn't like Soups. He kind of falls back into his former self, wondering if he should take the chance to kill Starlight just because she's a Soup, disregarding the fact that she's trying to help Huey and the boys. It really works on a character level, as he has to trust the one thing he hates the most, Soups, to help him find the one thing that he wants the most, his wife. And probably one of the most brilliant parts of the entire series, Billy chooses not to kill his son. This moment was absolutely spectacular. I couldn't believe how tense it was. I was literally on the edge of my seat. And Karl Urban's acting is absolutely stellar. The scowl that Billy Butcher has made me legitimately think that he was gonna kill this kid. His arc and descent was built up from the beginning of the series, and it really all led to this moment. So it was a character-defining moment, and it really paid off. Who would have thunk? Good writing and setup leads to good moments. I could honestly write a book about how great this scene is, but I'll save you the nonsense, and we'll talk about that later. But overall, Billy has some of the best writing in the show, and his character arc really reflects that. And I love the deeper meaning of his character, where he was afraid of what he was going to become. Even though his attempt at sacrificing himself is kinda silly in some situations, I thought it worked for his character overall, and it was really, really cool to watch. Huey's just as nerdy and endearing little bunny rabbit as he was in the first season. And one could even argue he has a more interesting arc than the previous season. The idea of trying to be a leader is essentially tied with the idea of being something he's not. He's not tough enough. He's not a leader. He's a little squirt, but that's what makes him essential to the boys and to Billy. Learning to be his own person was a logical extension of his corrupted desire. Although, I don't think it was handled the best way. Not to start complaining already, but I'm gonna start complaining. Huey was beyond self-perceptive in this season. He essentially told himself his own catharsis moment in the final episode. It's like he completed his own arc just by telling himself what he had to do. For the amount of great writing in the show, this was shockingly lazy, and I thought it was really disappointing. Per usual, Homelander may be the best part of the show. His character really takes a step up in this season. His desire to be loved by everybody adds to his dominant and insane nature. His craving for love, whether it be through pain or worship, is what made his character truly disgusting this season. However, as I was saying before, even some of the best characters have some poorly written moments, which shows up with Homelander and his relationship with Stormfront. What confused me is that he is no stranger to the thinking of superior and inferior. He has always thought that he is above humans, that they're nothing, that they're as useless as the gum on the bottom of his shoe. Earlier in the show, he responds to Stormfront's proposition of literal genocide with sex. So clearly he doesn't have a problem with the idea of genocide. But when Stormfront brings up the idea of white genocide, that's when he draws a line. That's when he gives that Jim Halpert look to the camera. It just seems like a weird inconsistency. But besides this, his character was great. Easily one of the best parts of the show. Penguin Zero, no hate mind you, I love that guy, said that he thought Homelander was way weaker in this season. But I have to disagree. Mr. Gwynns argued that Homelander is easily manipulated. And yeah, that's true. It's part of his character and I think it really works. Despite being strong physically, Stilwell was able to manipulate him in the first season through his desire for affection. So in this season, more characters just attack that weakness. It brings it up a notch. Affection is all he wants, so I think it makes sense that he's manipulated through his weakness. That's just like character development. Maeve has some pretty solid development too. Her helplessness transforms into nihilism when she loses the one person that she loves and comes to terms with what she has done. Yeah, Maeve, you maybe kinda screwed the pooch a couple of times. I liked her struggle deciding whether to stay or leave the Seven, ultimately ending in a heroic moment where she confronts Homelander. But this is interesting because it sets up something for the third season. She doesn't seem to be 100% for the boys or 100% for the Seven. Rather, she'll fight for whatever gets her what she wants, the love of her life. One highlight is that Billy's wife and child made for some amazing conflict. And Billy's kid isn't as annoying as I thought he would be. Even though his voice slightly resembles nails on a chalkboard, it's not that bad. Besides the characters being amazingly written, most of them, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but don't get your hopes up. There was some amazing writing at the end of the season that seems like it's setting up a really solid third season. For example, because you guys want examples of everything, the boys have disbanded, and Billy has denied the offer for government support. This allows for so many potential storylines. Is he gonna retire? Is he gonna try and save his kid from Vought? Is he gonna... That would be a pretty big change in character, but you see where I'm going with this. I'm also excited to see the relationship between Billy and his kid. I'm getting some serious God of War vibes, and I'm so excited for it. Not only this, but it completely works on a character level, as he'll have to face his biggest weakness, Supes, to save his child, who is a superhero. That is just, We also learned that Vought controls both sides of the battle. The stakes are so much higher because of this, and it builds an atmosphere similar to the first season, where it seems like the characters are always being watched no matter what. Homelander also ended the season seeming that much more insane, realizing that he can do whatever he wants, which is setting up a pretty solid Homelander breaking point that I can't wait to see. Although this moment probably would have been suited better for season 1 because in this season he kind of gets manipulated a lot. He says it's right after he gets blackmailed, so can he really do whatever he wants? Regardless, this is a cool moment that is setting up some promising things for the third season. The last episode of this season may be the best in the entire series. Billy meeting his son, Homelander encountering them, Maeve making a heroic return, Huey learning that he has to be his own person. and even some side characters' arcs are completed, all in really close proximity, creating a really fast pace to this episode. I was on the edge of my seat for the entire episode. It was like Scooby-Doo, asking myself what's gonna happen next for literally every single scene. Stakes were always rising, tensions were always breaking their ceiling, and I was biting my nails out of nervousness. That's just quality storytelling and easily makes for one of the best episodes of the series. Okay, here's the verbal abuse that we were talking about earlier. Even though there was pretty solid writing overall, it wasn't as good as the first season. It seemed a lot sloppier this time around. There's so many situations where the politics of the boys and the Seven's battles felt completely ridiculous, which is such a shame because that was easily my favorite part of the first season. So much of the drama from the first season stemmed from the boys having to outsmart or blackmail the Supes. So having that aspect of the show fail for me was just so disappointing. For example, unless they have all these videos and data set up to a pacemaker or something, I don't see why the superheroes can't just use their superpowers to kill whoever's blackmailing them before they can press a post button. Like, when Mavis threatening to release the footage of Homelander on the plane, can't he just use his laser vision and kill her? Or destroy the phone or something? It never explains that it's set up to a pacemaker or have any explanation as to why they can't just use their powers. So it makes some of these situations feel so stupid if you think about it for more than half a second. If A-Train doesn't drop dead from a heart attack, he could easily go out, do another bad thing, videotape it, blackmail himself, and destroy it 3 times over before any of these people can post whatever video they're blackmailing superheroes with. So many threats lose their merit when you just think about the situation logically, which is just so disappointing because, again, that's where so much great drama derived from in the first season. I was such a sucker for it too. God. This sloppiness is kind of seen in the overall story structure too. For one, there are so many conveniences in this season, mostly in the form of characters escaping inescapable situations, and the inconsistency of the story world rules. The season starts with the boys being the most wanted men in the world. They're the people whose names scroll on the bottom of news channels and have grainy pictures on the back of milk cartons. Everybody wants these people captured, dead, or at least knows that they're criminals. So tell me why. Tell me why. There are so many situations where the boys can just easily walk around, drive around, wherever they want, without any fear of being captured. They drive around a densely packed New York City, which, fine, I guess that makes sense. But how can Huey sneak into Vought Tower and have nobody know he's there? Do they not have security cameras or anything? And I get that he has Lamplighter with him to use his handprint or whatever, but you would think that Vought, a company that holds so many secrets, would update their security system after like the 5 years that Lamplighter is gone. Better yet, how does Huey stay in a hospital over multiple nights? The only thing that plays in hospitals are soap operas in the news, and nobody thought that Huey was probably the criminal that everybody is looking for. And as we said before, it's not just their wanted status that's really inconsistent, but characters get out of so many inescapable situations. Like when the boys are being chased by every single member of the Seven. Yeah, A-Train has a heart attack and stuff like that, but nobody wanted to use like their enhanced speed or flight or strength or anything to try and find the boys. It's so coincidental that Starlight is the first person to see them, and that for some reason a car is able to bring down Homelander. This also applies to the fortified neighborhood that Billy's wife lives in. Sure, I can get behind Billy sneaking in there once. It's Billy Butcher after all. But getting in there multiple times, and even having Billy's wife sneak out of there by herself, she's just on foot running away from what sounds like dozens, if not hundreds of guards. How is she able to not just, one, escape the situation, but find the boys without being caught? She also has to be wanted. Vought has to be looking for her. How is she not caught? There are too many examples of story world rules being broken, which completely ruins a lot of sequences in the show. It makes the world feel less dangerous and therefore less dramatic. These coincidences just weren't present in the first season, so I don't know what happened in the writing room, but it made this season a lot less impactful for me. I think that also maybe one of the biggest problems of this season was the lack of an overarching plot, at least in my opinion. Vought being exposed was interesting, but I feel like there was a lot of tangents that made us lose focus on this storyline. Each episode had something completely different happening, or so it felt. By the end of the season, I kind of forgot that Kimiko's brother died in the first place, and I especially forgot why he was important to the story. I think this is also because the lack of any real consequences from Vought being exposed. Sure, the people know there's some riots and whatnot. Those quickly switched to pro-white riots just a few episodes later. There was the court case, but honestly, because of the incoherence of the season, I didn't even know that was happening until the episode of, like, 5 minutes before. Call me forgetful, but hey, that's just how I felt this season. I also felt that there wasn't as much of a connection between the boys and the Soups. Rather than a solid overarching plot, it seemed like this season kind of went for a lot more subplots, which works for character development, but overall damages the coherence of the story. In the first season, there was such a clearly defined goal and a great sense of cause and effect. There was solid momentum to the first season because of this, and that's just lacking in this season. This could also be because there's a lot less interaction between the boys and the Soups, a lot less chess games being played between the two groups, if you will. This makes sense in the story, as they are the most wanted people alive, but as we were talking about before, it doesn't seem like this at all. And because of this, I couldn't help but feel more and more that the backbone of this show is the relationship between the protagonist and the antagonist. I just didn't feel like there was as strong as a connection there, which made the season more disappointing narratively. However, all of this could be due to the more episodic nature of the release dates, so I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid. A result of the sloppier writing and inconsistencies was a serious lack of tension. Tension is like the biggest thing in this show for me, so it was really weird feeling not a lot during the majority of this season. Again, I believe that the lack of confrontation between the boys and the Soups inherently made for less tension. In the last episode, there was such amazing tension because the two groups are colliding. Why wasn't there more of that in the entire season? The boys being completely outpowered in every scenario makes me wonder what they're going to do in each scene. Well, in the second season, I guess it's just run, because they don't do a whole lot. And the lack of confrontation between the two groups seems like a result from the incoherence of the overall plot and the emphasis on subplots. This season felt like there was always a break in flow because of the random tangents characters were going on. For example, when Huey, Starlight, and Mother's Milk spend the entire episode finding out information on the old superhero Liberty, that honestly could have just been something that was told to them, or at least used less screen time on. It's tangents like these that ruin tension in the show. The inconsistent story world that we were talking about earlier adds to this lack of tension. The boys consistently sneak into the unsneakable places. They're able to escape the Seven despite their super OP powers, and they can just freely walk and drive around a cramped New York City. The show tries to make it feel like they're always being watched through some meaningless actions and dialogue like switching cars and whatnot, but that doesn't do anything to make me feel like they're actually being watched. I need some consequences for what they're doing. Also, Vault got exposed, which subtracts a lot of the tension that was seen in the first season. I feel like they could have gone a lot more interesting direction if they chose to focus more on the consequences of this. And it ultimately doesn't result in much. Sure, it does some things, obviously, like make a cool arc for Homelander and stuff like that. But overall, I didn't feel a lot of repercussions from this massive action. The worst thing that happens is, again, some protests that quickly turn into racist protests, and a court case that, again, I didn't know was happening. Again, the show lazily tries to make us feel like this has consequences by making the characters fear about their points dropping, which has to be so important because the characters are mad about it. Except for the tiny fact that, what are points? Points mean nothing to me. How do they affect thought? How do they affect the Soups except for them getting all pissy about it? What do they do to the story? There was no repercussions of them dropping in points. We never see the points, we never know what the points are, they're never explained. It's so useless and such lazy writing. And I assume the points don't matter because they're making a movie about the superheroes still. If they really weren't popular, as we've seen in real life, actors would just be fired or entire productions be shut down. So I feel like they can't be that hated if a new movie's coming out in this cinematic universe. I think you guys get the point. There's a lot less tension this season for many reasons, which is incredibly disappointing. I also didn't find the world building as interesting as the first season. In the first season, I thought Buck made more sly, heinous, under-the-radar actions that made for a lot of really horrific moments. There's a realistic grime to these characters, their actions, and by extension, the world. I just didn't see this as much in the second season, which kind of disappointed me. In fact, I think it becomes somewhat less grounded by the insane locations and over-the-top gore. Call me crazy, but I'm not really the type of guy to laugh at some nerd covered in whale guts because haha, it's gross and funny. I just feel like the first season made more grounded and realistic decisions when it came to the action, the gore, and the decisions that characters made. That made it feel like there was a layer of dirt all over me at all times while watching this show. In the second season, it's kind of just like, yeah, I could take a shower and be gone. You know how I said most characters had solid development? Well, they weren't kind to everybody. The Deep seemed as good as non-existent. Truly, I don't know why he was there except to be set up for the third season. The Church of the Collective eventually became purposeful, But the Deep wasn't even the person to make the Church of the Collective purposeful. A-Train was the one that used their resources to get the dirt on Stormfront. So what did the Deep do except be useless? I think his scene still could have been there, especially if he's going to do something big in Season 3. They didn't need nearly as much screen time focused to the Deep as they had in the season. Another character that got the old non-treatment is the new head of Vought. He was such a plot device that I can't even remember his name. It's interesting that he puts up with Stormfront, who is just a straight up Nazi, in order to make some money. But we've already seen this corruption and this desire for wealth expressed in so many other characters. Okay, I know it is dogged on this season for a little bit, but that's out of love. The first season is genuinely some of my favorite TV ever. And I want the next season to be as great as possible, which with the solid writing, it seems like it can be. Essentially, this season was by no means bad, but definitely not as good as the first. Just bring back the interesting confrontations between the two groups, throw in some plot twists, spice it up with some of that classic boys gore, and garnish it with a solid overarching plot, and you're gonna have an amazing season 3. I'm excited for it, and you should be too. Thanks for watching.